I'm pretty happy. And quick thanks to my former teammates, Varric and Pujin, who let us walk over them. It was great, and I feel really bad, so I hope I can make them happy. And also, if I'm unclear, can you guys mind saying clear? Okay, cool. Is anyone in the room not ready? Everyone's ready? Okay. Start time now. Observation 1 is resolution analysis. The ACE point is a resolution. United States federal government should lower income tax in favor of the sales tax. The first point is going to be the definitions. We define sales tax as a tax paid to a governing body for the sale of goods. The second point is going to be income tax. We define income tax as a government levy that imposed on individuals that vary with the different parts of the income bracket. Observation 2 is going to be the plan text or advocacy. Okay. Our advocacy is this. The United States federal government should lower income tax for Americans who currently pay a 15% tax or lower income bracket. Specifically, $30,000. Anyone less than $30,000, we lower their income tax to 0% in favor of a national sales tax of 10%. Once again, we lower everyone that's making under $30,000 to an income tax of 0% while we make the national sales tax 10%. Any questions?
Can I have a text, please?
Yeah.
I read it.
Oh, read them a text. Yeah. Okay. Observation 3 is the inherency. The first point is that the top 1% own over 1/3 of America's net worth according to inequality.org. The second point is that right now there's a specific sales bracket. So right now people making $0 to $13,250 pay 10% tax rate, while people paying $13,000 to $50,000 pay 15% tax rate. So we're effectively lowering people that make $30,000 to a 0% tax rate. The third point here is that people that make over $440,000 pay 40%, which is a significant tax rate. However, that is not significant enough because they still make a lot of money. The fifth point is that the National Bureau of Economic Records derived the top base for a comprehensive retail sales tax to 10%. They also advocate for 10%. Okay, the first advantage is income. Yeah, what was that?
So, in terms of your plan, is this sales tax going to be added on to current state sales tax, or is it going to just be taken in place of state sales tax?
Added. Okay. Advantage 1 is income inequality. The first uniqueness is that the huge problem right now is that a lot of people are making, the top 1% are making a lot of money, and the bottom aren't making enough money to live themselves. The B point here is that the overall amount of money that they make is not enough to pay their family. The link here is that the plan passes and poor families have significantly more money to spend now because we lower the income tax rate to 0. Because of the fact that the tax rate, even though it's small, they make small money, which means that this is a big proportion that affects their money. The first impact is going to be oppression. We say that oppression is the root cause of all violence because let's say that a poor family goes out and takes a loan. This means that if they don't get the loan, this means that the loan sharks will always enact violence on them. That is the root cause of all violence. The second point is going to be that we specifically help minorities. Okay, the first point is that a white family will typically see a return of $19.5 for every dollar earned, while a black family will only see $4.80 in return. This is according to Forbes. The second point here is that the typical white family earns $50,000 to $400, while the typical black family earns $32,038. And the typical Latino family is $36,000 and $840,000. So we can clearly see that in the world today, we can see black and Latino families. We can see families of all the ethnic groups. They earn actually less than white families, which means that we significantly help ethnic minorities, which means that is a very good point. The third impact here is going to be crime. We say that crime places a very big impact. And first off, we can see that places with very low income, they actually resort to a lot more crime. The B point here is that during the Great Depression, crime rose significantly in every place because we can see that the economy was very bad, which means that people always had to resort to crime. And this means that there's always going to be violence enacted in a world of crime, which means that with our plan, when the link passes, we can clearly see that these families make significantly more money, significantly more net worth of money, which means that they have more money to spend. We can see a direct result of crime. Yeah. Okay. The second advantage is underreporting. In 2006, the IRS underreported their income by a collective of $450 billion. The B point here is that this number is only going up. According to an IRS report from December 2015, found that underreporting has increased 30% from 5 years ago. The C point is that no one is exempt. Federal employees are notorious for underreporting. The D point is that higher socioeconomic classes underreporting, where they were underreporting more than lower socioeconomic. Sorry, I took 2 questions. So higher socioeconomic classes underreport more than lower socioeconomic classes. The D point is that pretty much the impact here, this is our thesis, pretty much there's going to be less cheating and underreporting in the world today, which is also a critical impact of less exploiting minorities, because we can clearly see that this ties back to our first advantage about how in the world today minorities are already less advantaged, but with underreporting we can clearly see that this only happens more because higher socioeconomic people are able to actually exploit the lower class. And this is a terminalized impact of exploiting minorities, and we need to prevent this. The last advantage is record keeping. Okay. So the first argument is that individuals who make 37. What was this? Individuals who make what?
Individuals who make under 37,600.
Okay, sorry. So individuals who make less than $37,650 per year will no longer have to keep tax records or files income tax returns. This means that this significantly goes with our plan because we can clearly see that we're lowering the income tax for these people, specifically under $30,000 to 0%. The scroll right now. Sorry, I have a lot to get through. If I have time at the end. The scroll right now is that 150 million Americans fill out complicated federal, states, and local income tax ventures. And the C point here is that this saves the lower class money. A Laffer Foundation study indicated that Americans pay $431 billion annually on tax record keeping and return preparation. So that's an extra 30 cents on every dollar that we save. So pretty much to summarize, it's pretty clear that people that make this amount of money have to pay a lot of money to actually keep their taxes, which means that with our plan, it directly helps because people making under $30,000 have no income tax, which means that they don't have to do these things like record keeping. Am I missing anything? Okay, which means that they don't have to missing anything. And the first impact here is obviously we're once again helping the people that are lower socioeconomically disadvantaged. We help them, we give them more money in order to strive in the economy. Last sheet of paper is our interpretation. Okay. Our interpretation for framework is that you should always be referring systemic impacts first. The first here is that 1% risk calculus is a bankrupt method for understanding the actions that we should make. The first subpoint A here is going to be that there are so many scenarios that could lead to extinction. Literally, Violet and I thought of 18 ways before this round that this round could lead to extinction. However, we need to think of systemic impacts first. The B point here is that if you use this value calculus, every action could lead to extinction or solve to extinction, which means that we always need to prefer systemic impacts first. The C point here, next are the link chains. One. We will. The first argument here is that if we don't prefer systemic impacts, we will always put systemic impacts off. We will never address systemic impacts because we will always go for isolated scenarios that never lead to solving anything. The C point here is that the second point here is that you need to prefer systemic impact and what happens in the status quo right now. The first is that we solve for magnitude, time frame, and probability because it's a 100% probability because systemic impacts always happen in the status quo. We also solve for time frame because it's always happening right now. We also solve for magnitude because systemic impacts are the biggest impacts in the world today, such as poverty, systemic things such as people dying every day due to the environment. We need to stop these kinds of things. For all these reasons, I affirm.
Oh, God. Just check.
Okay. Again, congrats everyone. Just kind of like repeating what you said. Congrats. So I'll go their framework, then off on.
Framework off on.
Yeah.
In the order that we did on the on.
Yeah. There's no change.
All right. Can you just give me a second?
Yeah.
Flip this way.
On. All right.
Okay. Everyone ready? Okay, great. Starting time now. So basically on their framework, like we meet, like this is how we can figure out that's fine. We're not going to try to link to extinction. We don't have any crazy scenarios like that. Like fine, we meet time frame, magnitude, probability, all things we should be considering over extinction. Whatever, that's fine. Systemic impacts first. We meet on that. So now on to our first disadvantage out of disproportionality. So the claim here is that things like flat taxes, like especially national sales tax, affect the poor far more than they affect the rich. So you can see here's the warrant here is low-income families spend almost every single penny that they earn on subsistence items. That means things like going out and buying food, clothes, gas for their cars, things like that. They pay a higher percent on their earnings than they do in higher percent of their earnings on things like sales tax than they actually do on things like income tax. And that's warrant is for people that make under $80,000. So it still applies to, according to Forbes, this does apply to this resolution. Basically, the rich can afford to put this money into like investments and let it accrue. They don't have to spend all their money on subsistence items. So you can see when the poor are like, when you have these flat sales taxes and you increase them by such a significant amount, because we asked in a POI if they're adding this on the sales tax, which they are, so that drives, some states already have 9% sales taxes, so we add this on, add another 10%, 19% sales tax that's occurring, that disproportionately affects the rich affects the poor more than it affects the rich at the end of the impacts. I'll get it. Sure. So now onto the impacts. So the first impact is out of class system. This perpetuates the divide between the rich and the poor because you have this thing where the government is systemically favoring the rich over the poor. This is things like increasing social tensions. They talk a lot about the 1%. This makes this problem worse because now you see the increase in things such as the Occupy Wall Street movement and all these social tensions. Again, we also impact also racism because, again, like the majority of the poor are African American, but or they're 27% of people that are poor are African American, but they only make up 12% of the population. So you can see significant disproportionately African Americans are in poverty. So you can see this disproportionately affects them. So then this also increases in things like death and decreasing their ability to put food on the table because now a lot of their money has to go to sales taxes instead of actually going to subsistence items. Yeah.
Okay, in a world where we make the people that make less than $30,000 as income tax of 0%, how are they more affected by the sales tax if we give them 0% tax?
Because now they end up paying more of a percentage on taxes because you lower it. So right now they pay between like 5 to 10% on like things like income tax, but now instead like you're adding it onto the sales tax. In the states that already have, so now it's like 10% plus the 9% sales tax that a lot of states already have. So that's 19%, which is more than what they were paying.
Plus the people that make
Yeah.
between 30 and 80 and you're trying to support full families still,
Yeah.
still are going to get more.
Yeah, plus the people that make between $30,000 and $80,000, which is still not a lot of money, are still going to be hit really, really hard by this because now you're adding the sales tax onto them, and you have there's income taxes. So now you also increase impact the middle class as well. So now onto our second point, which is that of the economy. So a lot of businesses are currently upset about the rate of high taxes, the trend of high taxes in the United States. An estimated $2 trillion has already left our economy in favor of overseas markets because the U.S. has really high taxes. This also will harm small businesses because small businesses are the backbone of our economy, and they rely on things like business and things like that to function. So what you can see here is the link here is the plan passes, and we levy a sales tax on all businesses. This increases basically they increase the sales tax. That's the link here on all businesses. What? Yeah, and you still have the income tax. And you still have the income tax. So what this means is the impacts of this is one, people are now paying more of their money to one, income tax and sales tax. Now you increase the sales tax by a lot. So this is one, people have less money to spend on other goods, and two, now businesses are you see less people going out and buying things. So this is one, they have less money, and two, there's higher sales taxes. You will also see an increase of money flight out of the U.S. economy in favor of overseas markets because you have because now you have higher taxes, and the businesses are really they have said they're really upset about these high taxes. So now they'll leave. You've already seen this $2 trillion flight that will only increase when they see the United States is raising their taxes again. So now you can also see the IRS would be destroyed because they talk about how there's what? No, okay, never mind. Sorry, scratch that. Never mind. So third onto the point about tax evasion. So the uniqueness here, basically the claim here is that the government would not reap the full benefits of this sales tax because of things like tax evasions. There are basically two scenarios that can happen here. First is businesses would start offering more deals to those who pay in cash. So it's easier to evade your taxes and not go kind of off the books when you're paying in cash. So we would see businesses in favor of evading sales tax would offer better deals to people that are willing to pay in cash. This is tax evasion. The government wouldn't see that money. Second, you would also see an increase in people buying internationally online. There's no sales tax on when you buy internationally online because that would be considered an import tariff, which is something completely different. So they can't argue that there's going to be a sales tax on the internet when you buy internationally. So people would also take their money overseas and buy more things. So the link here is the plan passes, and you see an increase in this happening, and the U.S. won't get their money. So the impacts of this is you see increase in money going out of the U.S. economy. You see and the U.S. will not be getting the tax revenue that it needs to keep functioning. This will lead to decreased government revenue, decrease in things like welfare programs. I'm doing impact tax evasion right now, Sean. You will also see a decrease in revenue and a decrease in the ability of welfare programs that are trying to help these lower class people that they harm. So now on to case. So their first contention was that about income inequality. They said, well, people pay a lot, these lower income people pay a lot of money on taxes. But actually what you see now is they're actually going to end up paying more of their money on taxes as a result of the sales tax. Right now we tell you that they only pay between 5 and 10% depending on their exact income bracket in the status quo. Now they're going to have to be paying 19% because they're going to have to pay state, local, and federal sales taxes on top of each other. That results in more money that they have to be paying, and you can see that's significant harm to them. So you see we turn this point because it actually perpetuates income inequality, cross-apply our first disadvantage. Second, again, we still have the tax bracket between $30,000 and $80,000 where they're still going to be paying. Now they're still going to be paying income tax, and they're going to be paying this really fat federal sales tax on top of state and local sales taxes. Things that disproportionately harms them as well. We turn their point of income inequality. Second, they talk about how there's going to be an increase in crime. How there's no link to this because first they don't solve for the 30,000 tax bracket because you still see they're going to have to pay even more taxes and sales taxes than they would be paying the federal government just regularly in income tax. And second, you see cross by what I said that the 30 to 80,000 tax bracket. You don't solve for them, one, and two, you just exacerbate the problem because they have to pay more of their money on taxes. Third, they talk about the IRS, how there's a lot of exemption and there's it's tax evasion and stuff, and So one, they talked about underreporting and government officials, and government officials are the worst. I don't think government officials are the ones making less than $30,000, so I don't think they're not going to solve for this harm at all. Second, like people making less than $30,000, basically they tend to not have like these crazy investments or like things that they have to like declare on their taxes. So they can fill out what's called 1040 EZs, which are actually pretty simple forms. They just declare your income earnings, which is probably what these people are filling out in the first place. So they don't have elaborate investments and other things they need to be declaring. So they can fill out a 1040 EZ. That's pretty easy in the That's literally what it's called. It's pretty easy to do in the status quo. You just have to declare your earnings. So that's not really that hard to begin with. And then finally, they talked about how you're going to decrease the exploitation of the poor people. No, this will only increase because one, you're forcing poor people to pay a higher percentage of their income on sales taxes, and second, because you're still harming that the middle class tax bracket that's going to have to pay more in taxes overall. Finally, on to the fourth about record keeping. They talked about how their warrant was about 30,000, like 30 people that make 37,000 people. This is not the same thing because they're talking about under 30,000. Second, cross-buy bonus out the 1040 easy. It's pretty easy for them to do. Then it's a $431 billion industry. That doesn't apply because that's all tax things, not just under 30,000. So for all these reasons, I just don't vote for neg. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to be doing a quick overview, so the off and the AC.
Wait, sorry, can you repeat that?
So I'm going to be doing like an overview, which you don't really have to flow, then the off, then the on.
Off, on? Okay. Everyone good?
1 second.
Sorry, yeah, let me get it.
I just want to save this so that it doesn't disappear.
Are you doing anything on the framework page? Or?
No, just like extending it, I guess.
Okay.
I would agree.
That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good.
The main problem with the net case is that they tell you that all their impacts stem from the fact that the middle class and the lower class are going to be paying more if you enact the affirmative plan, but they don't give you any numbers. It's really hard to argue this economic argument, which tells you that people are going to be paying more under the affirmative plan if you don't have any statistics to support your argument. This is going to be a crucial flaw because you're going to have to extend the evidence presented in our first speech that explicitly tells you that, one, in 2006, the IRS underreported their income by a collective $450 billion. They tell you that people are still going to evade taxes because they're going to be incentivized to pay in cash and they're going to be incentivized to go online and to go on to international markets, but they have no warrants for this. We tell you explicitly that systematic impacts have to be happening in the status quo. And if it's happening in the status quo, they should have come up and presented you with some data weighing their impacts. So you have no way to analyze whether the impacts of people going online, people going offshore, or people paying in cash is going to be worse than people currently underreporting their income tax. You have to air out because we're the only one providing you an actual warrant for the IRS. This is a $450 billion economic warrant. We are winning on this argument very clearly. Don't let them bring it up in their next speech. Second, we tell you explicitly that the number of people currently evading their income tax is only going to go up. So according to an IRS report from December 2015, underreporting has increased by 30% in the last 5 years. This tells you that in the status quo, people are underreporting more and more every year. That means in the future, if people continue to have the rate of income tax that they do right now, underreporting is going to increase. Yes?
How do you solve for underreporting?
So we solve for underreporting because we make sure that poor people do not have to file the income tax returns that they do right now. What we tell you is that people in the upper class are the people who are mostly underreporting, right? Like if you make $8 billion a year and you file a tax return for $6 billion a year, then you evade taxes by like whatever you have to pay under $2 billion, right? But the poor people, they really have a really difficult time filing these tax returns, which means that they're the ones who are most affected by tax evasion because the rich don't contribute what they need to do to society, and the poor who depend on them for like various social benefits, are the ones who are ultimately disadvantaged by the fact that people are evading the taxes. So the impact is an increase in income inequality where the rich are contributing what they need to do through the federal tax, which should be applied evenly to all classes. What we're showing you is it's being applied unevenly because the rich disproportionately evade taxes compared to the poor. On to the record-keeping impact, we specifically tell you that 150 million Americans have to fill out like super complicated forms. They tell you this is really easy, but we tell you specifically that this affects certain groups more than others. Like if you can't speak English, if you are a minority, like it's obviously harder for you to fill out taxes. Again, their arguments are functionally warrantless. They're like, oh, it's super easy, but it's obviously not easy for people if they're underreporting every year and people are having difficulty filing their tax forms. Yeah. On to the off case. So first, their advantage is that this disproportionately affects people. She blatantly says in her last speech that this affects pretty much everyone, even people who like spend over $30K are affected by the affirmative plan, which means that it's not disproportionate because in order to prove that this is disproportionate, she needs to show that our plan affects the rich, like better than it affects the poor, but she doesn't really prove that because she talks about how the poor spend every single penny they have on spending, but this doesn't matter because if I make like $30K a year and I spend like $30K on my spending just to meet my basic needs like food and whatever, versus if I make $100K per year, I'm still going to spend like $30K and we'll both be paying the same tax. So that's just how a percentage works. Like this isn't disproportionate because it's not affecting the rich more than it affects the poor. Anyway, like taxing every penny that the poor spend is still less than like taxing the rich, and the rich spend more on like luxury items, right? Like if I buy like I can afford to buy a giant yacht if I'm like super rich, and then I have to pay a high sales tax on it, which will end up benefiting the poor because it'll go to the government, which will spend on like social programs and stuff. But like if I'm poor, I just won't have that sort of expense in the first place, which means that I won't run into the sales tax. The sales tax only affects people who have spending income, and the only people who have spending income are the upper middle class and the upper class. So we're actually benefiting the turn. And second, I want to talk about ideology for a bit because we are prioritizing like consumption over income. Essentially what this says is that people should be taxed for how much they consume, how many resources they deplete, rather than just how much they make every year. And we say that you should prefer this ideology because it's important for you to preserve resources over time versus just discriminate on people based on like the class they're in, based on the race they're in, which pretty much determines what income bracket they're going to be in the future. On the second advantage, which is about business, so they basically tell you two kind of contradictory arguments. First, they tell you that businesses are going to go overseas, and second, they tell you that small businesses are going to suffer. So I want to make it very clear that the small businesses are not going to be the ones who are going overseas. Small businesses don't have the income to go overseas. They have to stay in the United States in the first place. So there's a distinction here. Second, this is essentially racist. What we're telling you is that the lower classes are overwhelmingly minorities, like African Americans, Latinos, who are making more money, so they're not the business owners in the first place. And our plan is helping the people who actually need help. Like if you're the owner of a small business, you are obviously making like some level of income on it, and you're, like owners of small businesses are disproportionately higher income because they have business to earn income from. We're trying to benefit like the classes that are suffering as a result of like high income taxes, like essentially people who make under 30K. So finally, their advantage about evasion, again, the huge problem with this is that they don't have any numbers. They make a lot of logical turns like, oh yeah, poor people might spend money on this, rich people might spend money on this, but they don't actually tell you how much they're going to spend, which means there's no way for you to do impact comparison. All you can do is extend the evidence coming out of the AC. Yeah.
Not just statistics, but we turn it because if the rich pay a much higher sales tax, then it goes to the government, and then therefore like they get more social programs and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason why rich like tax evasion is bad is because the taxes paid by like the very, very rich are what essentially fund social programs, right? Because they pay such high numbers in income taxes. But like when they're evading taxes, this doesn't happen, which is why we need to charge sales tax to ensure that they can't evade taxes. So onto the AC. First, their only response on the entire AC is essentially that they say that we're somehow increasing the amount that middle class people pay because the sales tax goes up to 19%. But one, we proved to you that the lower class has less spending income than the upper class. This is a very intuitive argument. If you have more spending income, you will have to pay more in sales tax because you just have more sales. This means that the rich are more affected by the affirmative plan than the lower income. This is the only turn that they have on the AC. If we prove that the higher classes spend more money than the lower and middle classes, there is like no disproportionality argument because we're the only ones who can impact out to classism because we're forcing the rich to sort of fund social programs for the poor and benefiting them. This impacts out to oppression. Firstly, loan strikes are an act of systematic violence. This is the biggest impact in the round. Another problem with the NC is that they don't really terminalize any of the impacts. Like, so what? The economy loses like some money. What actually happens then? They tell you that there is racism in the status quo, but they also don't provide any sort of solvency for that. We're the only one who can solve because we're telling you that we're going to stop like the incidences of systematic oppression, like the way minorities always like have lower returns on every dollar that they spend, the way they always have like strikes against them, the way they're forced into low-income communities where crime is high, and the way the rich avoid paying taxes in order to put them in order to prevent them from living in better places.
Our plan affects mostly minorities who are making less than $30,000, which is a huge proportion of the lower income tax bracket, which means that we are only helping solve income inequality.
In the end, the way you're going to weigh this is systematic impacts versus what affects the rich, what affects the poor, who's going to be helping the poor most. And the fact is we're excusing the poor from paying a significant income tax, which is currently about 15%. We're making that 0%. The only argument, the only defense they have is that they say charging a sales tax is going to make them pay more, but it's not going to make them pay more because they're not spending enough. They don't have enough money to spend like on luxury items. Rich people are obviously spending more on a day-to-day basis, which means they're going to be the most affected. That's any case. There we go.
Speak like this. My head's out the frame. There you go. Everybody ready? Jay. Oh yeah, sorry about that. I'm just gonna go top of case, then I'm gonna go neg af or off on. Observation, whatever they did, and then I'm gonna go off on. So they didn't extend it, so I'm gonna just go off on.
Okay.
balanced system on here.
All right. Is everybody ready? All right, starting time now. Okay, first of all, let's consider the off case. Now, first of all, let's go into our first decision. We talked about how they talked about, disproportionality. Well, first of all, they say, well, it's not disproportionate, but they seem to really ignore the fact, they really ignore our whole statistic. Our whole thing coming straight from Forbes was the fact is that we say that the rich people don't have to spend the money. The rich people can sit on their money, they can save their money, and they can use it in investments and stuff. That evades not only the sales tax, but at the same time it evades the income tax because that's different. That's called a capital gains tax. We talk about how they can sit on their money, they don't need to spend it, so therefore they can actually sit on this money. Whereas the poor people have to spend their money for everyday life. They spend a majority of their money on things such as food, water, things like that. They have to spend a majority of their money. They dropped this. This came straight from Forbes. This is the fact that would be a negative impact of this because they have to spend their money on everyday needs, whereas the poor have money to save and put away. The rich have money to save and put away. The poor don't have this money. They dropped this major thing coming out of it. That's the warrant coming straight from Forbes. You drop this, we went on this contention. As well as the fact that this clearly disproportionate because guess what? If I have $100,000, I can put some of that into the bank, some of it into my food. If I only got $30,000, I gotta spend it on food. I gotta put food on the table. I gotta feed my kids. So therefore, it's going to get taxed even more. A majority of my money is going to be taxed. As well as the fact that they dropped the fact that clearly the warrant. Well, guess what? If they're only paying 5 to 10% in terms of their income, but you're taxing them for what they spend, you're taxing them 19, 20%, 25%. Those percentages are way higher than what their actual income tax would be, and they drop that whole entire idea. That's the fact. That's your numbers right there. The fact is that clearly, if you're paying more on what you're spending, then clearly you're going to be losing more money, therefore disproportionately affecting them. And they drop the fact that it affects the people that from 30 to 80K, which don't necessarily all have that much money. Now they're not only paying a sales tax, but they're paying an income tax. 20-something% sales tax, and then you have people paying 15, 20% on income taxes too. So that's huge, and they drop that whole thing, which clearly disproportionately affects those people because just because you're not making under 30K doesn't mean that you're not necessarily the richest person in the world. 30 to 80K trying to support a family of 4 is a hell of a lot of money to be spending, and so therefore you're disproportionately affected even more, which then leads out back to our impacts, talking about how it promotes classism, pushes people that lower down in the class because they have to spend more money on certain things, and the rich get to get richer, poor get poor, and the middle class gets destroyed. It leads out to racism because there are more people in the lower end of the tax bracket that are African American and minorities, whereas there are more white people at the top of the tax bracket, which impacts out to racism. And then that impacts out to things such as increased poverty, increased death, less people being able to food, starvation, all that bad stuff. And since they drop our warrants for that contention, that whole entire contention flows through about Forbes, where they have to spend more money, the poor people have to spend more money. And the fact of the matter is they drop the fact that you have people paying sales and income tax, so therefore we went on that. Second, going into econ. Well, first of all, they say, will it happen? They say, and they kind of give us this point when they say small businesses won't go overseas. Yeah, that's the point. They can't go overseas, so therefore they have to go out of business. Because now you have small businesses paying income tax, and then you have to have them charging a ridiculous high sales tax, which means they're not going to be able to stay afloat. They didn't negate the fact that they can't stay afloat. All they said was, well, they won't go overseas. That's the whole point of our contention. The big businesses leave and go overseas, which means you agree with that part of the contention, that they leave, so we lose trillions of dollars. We talked about the $2 trillion being gone, so you agree with that. And then the only other thing you negate is you say small businesses can't leave. Well, yeah, that's the point. They go out of business. And when you don't negate the actual warrants that we have in the contention, and you just say that they won't leave and try to group them together, we went on that contingent as well, leading out to all the impacts coming out of that: poverty, death, decrease in business, decrease in jobs, blah, 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 blah. You get the point. Terminalized impacts, and I guess they're whatever word they use in the topic case when they present it. Systemic, there you go. Anyways, then disproportionately affecting poor people, black people, all of that good stuff. Anyways, going third into tax evasion. You don't solve. First of all, you have an increased amount of tax evasion. Like they said, they literally gave us the contention. A majority of the people evading taxes are the rich. Okay? You don't do anything about it. You give them a sales tax, which then gives them more reason to continue. That doesn't affect the way that they evade taxes. They sit on their money. Going back to the fact that they dropped the warrant in our first contention, that they sit on their money and they invest their money. That is not covered by sales tax, and that is not covered by their income tax. And you don't solve for them evading the taxes in the first place. Therefore, what you can see here is they're not actually doing anything, but you are disproportionately affecting the poor. So therefore, when you agree and you don't negate the statistic that that they sit on their money and invest it, therefore it doesn't get taxed by sales, and it doesn't get taxed in terms of income, you lose on that tax as well. The tax evasion is going to continue. Plus, we have the warrant that people are going to pay in cash. You don't negate the fact that people are going to pay in cash to actually evade the taxes. So therefore, we went on that as well. You can't just drop the warrants to the contention. It's not how it works. We went on those. Now, going on to the next case. Let's go on to their case. Okay, for real. Income inequality. First of all, they say, well, no. this whole thing, I explained to you how they lost in income inequality. First of all, they ignore the fact is that they're paying 5 to 10% income tax, but now you're making them pay 20% sales tax, higher than the tax they originally paid. You drop that. Plus, you drop the fact that they have to actually spend their money to put food on the table, whereas the rich people can sit on their money, tax evasion, and explain this about 50,000 times, as well as the fact that they say, well, the percent is the same. Percent is the same. I don't care if the percent is the same. It still disproportionately affects. If I only got $10, guess what? That means a whole lot more to me than if I got $10 billion. Then, that's a drop in the hat. You can't ignore that. Plus, the 30 people paying 30 to 80K, you got a sales tax and an income tax, which disproportionately affects them because they are not the rich. You got people making $30,500. Okay, cool. Now they're suddenly the richest people in the world, and that a sales tax and an income tax is not going to just completely obliterate them? Yeah, you ignore that fact, and you drop that warrant, so therefore you lose on that too. And the whole second thing about underreporting, you don't really solve for it. Like I talked about, they said they literally try to warrant underreporting by saying that poor people are going to solve for underreporting, but then they say the rich are the ones that don't report, and they're the ones that have the most money making the biggest impact. So, I don't really understand because you don't solve it all. And we clearly come up here and tell you don't solve it all because the rich are still going to underreport. All your statistics say the rich underreport and that they're going to keep underreporting. So you don't solve for anything because the poor underreporting doesn't actually do anything. Plus you have them paying a higher sales tax. Plus you have them disproportionately. Plus, like we said, we have the little easy form. But even if you don't buy the whole easy form, okay, cool, the poor report more. Okay, great, but you still don't solve for the rich underreporting, which is the whole basis of your contention, therefore you lose on that as well. And then let's go on to their last and final contention. Where was that? Oh, record keeping. Okay, first of all, this contention is just kicked out in one line. We literally said your warrant for this contention was the fact that people making $37,650, something about tax records, okay, boom, so we went on that. Your plan was for people under 30K. Your entire contention falls because your warrant was for something that your plan has nothing to do with at all. But then again, even if you do want to believe that, let's take the $37,650K. Now, not only are they going to have to pay like a 20% sales tax, which you actually don't negate, they're also going to pay, 15 to, I don't know exactly, but it's clearly more than 5 to 10. So 15, 20, 25%? I can make whatever I want. You didn't negate it. 15, 20, 25% income tax too? Now these people are just super poor. They're super broke. So for all the reasons stated today, the fact is that you don't solve for any underreporting, the fact is that you have increased income inequality, the fact is that you don't negate any of our warrants, therefore all of our impacts flow through, and they're all systemic, might I point out. I urge a strong vote for the negation team. Any new points brought up, any new responses will definitely be point of order.
Your computer fell asleep.
I see.
Oh, it still is? Okay.
I think so.
Just making sure. Okay. I'm just going to do voters like consolidate issues. Basically, 4 main voter issues.
Do you care where we flow it?
I don't care because, a lot of our points are kind of directly clashing, so I'm going to do a lot of weighing on that. So wherever you choose to flow, I guess. Most of it will be off base, technically. Okay. Is everyone ready? Okay, great. So let's talk about the single biggest issue in this round that was really under talked about by the affirmation team, and that is the middle class. I get up here in my speech and I talk a lot about the 30,000 to 80,000 tax bracket. That goes hugely dropped by the affirmation team. They don't respond. This will disproportionately affect them. Because now look, now the middle class, in addition to paying their 10 to 15% income tax, they're going to have to pay between 15 and 20% of sales tax. And we tell you it's on top of state and local taxes that already exist in the status quo. They concede that, so we can see it's adding on. That's way more taxes that the middle class is going to have to pay. And they don't solve for that because they're only taking away income tax for people that make less than $30,000. So we still have this really fat bracket and this really large number of people in the United States that are part of the middle class, which is one of the backbones of our economy. So you can see if we tax them more and if we take away their money, you can see now we're going to see several impacts coming out of this. One, the middle class will have significantly less money. What does this mean? Now they're going to go out and spend less. They're not going to stimulate our economy because they're not going to have as much money to go out and spend. When they don't have as much money to go out and spend, businesses lose money. When businesses lose money, they have to lay people off. When they lay people off, this increases poverty. When you increase poverty, you decrease your quality of life, you increase your chances of disease, and you increase your chance of dying. On another level, this also increases classism and income inequality because now you're disproportionately affecting the middle class. So what you can see here is when you increase income inequality, you perpetuate classism, and you increase social tensions because, look, again, provided the warrant of the Occupy Wall Street movement, people are really mad about income inequality. So when you make income inequality worse, this only increases social tensions. So yeah, we're clearly winning on the issue of middle class. They largely dropped it. My partner pointed out that they dropped it. He extended all of my responses. So you can see that any new responses in the PMR will be, new responses will be point of order. So you can see we're clearly winning on the issue of middle class. That's the single biggest issue in today's round. We have systemic impacts about poverty and like all that stuff coming out of it. So you can see we're clearly winning on the issue of the middle class. Second, let's talk about some, basically just the analysis on the income tax versus the sales tax, about how this will actually make it harder for the poor to, or just make it worse for the poor. So currently, if you make less than $30,000 and you're in that tax bracket, you pay about 5 to 10% in income tax. Now you're going to make it again. You're going to make it so they pay between 15 and 25% of their income on sales tax. That's a clear increase in the percentage of their money that's going to taxes and not going to their ability to put food on the table and buy subsistence things for them that's basically survive. So when you increase their sales tax, you disproportionately affect them now because you're having them pay more in taxes. So you actually don't solve for their problems. Yeah, so we're winning on this issue. So now, again, they'll have less money to buy subsistence things, they'll increase poverty, and they won't be able to put food on the table, and again, increase in debt. Again, all these are systemic impacts. So third, let's talk a little bit about businesses. So on our second disadvantage, we talked about how there's been a $2 trillion flight of money out of the economy already due to high taxes. There's a direct link here because they increase taxes. So when you increase taxes, you'll see more money fly out of our economy. They dropped this point. They said we didn't have any warrants. They talked about their $431 billion industry, whatever. We have the $2 trillion warrant. That clearly outweighs, because they have a $431 billion loss or whatever that they talk about. We show you a $2 trillion loss that's already happening in the status quo, and that will increase as a direct result of their plan. So you can see there's two scenarios coming out of this economy disadvantage. The first is that large corporations will leave to lower places that have lower taxes. That means they'll no longer be employing Americans, which again increases unemployment in the United States. The white mechanism will set to net benefits the United States. So now you have less people that have jobs in the United States. Again, you increase in systemic poverty and things like that. So that's the first scenario. The second scenario here is about the small businesses. We tell you small businesses are the backbone of the American economy. They don't respond to this, so you can see small businesses are a huge issue in today's round. So what this means is that they can see that small businesses can't leave. So when they can't leave and they have no other option, they don't have any money, and they're broke, they have to shut down. When they shut down again, we see people being laid off, increase in systemic poverty, increase in unemployment, decrease in quality of life. You see, these are all again systemic impacts. So you can see we're clearly winning on the issue of business. So you can see now these businesses will, the big businesses will leave, leading into increased poverty, and the small businesses will have to shut down, lay people off. So all these, you can see, are net detriments to the United States economy, and the economy is significantly decrease. Now, the final voter issue is going to be about tax evasion. So we both have, again, competing claims about tax evasion, who's paying taxes, who's not, blah, blah, blah. So what you can see here is on the, okay. So basically what they tell you is that there's a big industry about people evading taxes. First, they tell you it's government employees. Like I said, which went unresponded to. Government employees don't make less than $30,000 a year. This one unresponded to, so it's not even an issue. Second, they tell you that it's mostly the rich people that are evading taxes. What we tell you is that, one, the rich people will continue to evade taxes no matter what because they don't decrease the income tax for the rich. And second, you'll see an increase in tax evasion because people will be inclined to pay in cash. Because guess who can afford to pay in cash for luxury items? The rich people. You can go buy that yacht with cash. They can do all these things because they have the money, they're sitting on it, and they're not stimulating the economy with it. So you can see we're clearly winning on the issue of tax evasion in two ways. One, they don't solve for it, which is what the burden of the affirmation team. And second, it increases under their plan because the rich will continue to evade taxes. They'll buy things in cash. They'll take their money overseas. So for the reasons of the middle class disproportionately affecting the poor, businesses, and tax evasion, I just strong vote for the negation team. Thank you.
Okay. Is everyone ready? Okay. The biggest thing you're going to be voting on today is systemic impacts, but we claim that we solve for systemic impacts more because first you can look to our uniqueness where we claim that the biggest portion of the ones that are paying under 30K are actually those that are minorities. Specifically, you can look to our uniqueness that points us, which is that percentage-wise, we're going to be winning on this point because we claim that the 15% that we drop to 0% always solves more than the money from the tax rate. My partner pretty much claimed this in her speech, and this is important because it's a direct stat that clashes where we're saying that the 15% drop to the 0% drop. The 0% drop is a prerequisite to your argument because we give them more money to spend in the first place because right now they don't have money to spend. That is a whole problem. When we give them more money to spend, a 15% to 0% tax rate is a huge drop. It makes a lot of money. Simple math will show this, which means that we went on this point about solving for income inequality. The second point is that okay. So the second point is that of course they have no money to spend. Okay, we solve for income inequality. Okay. Specifically, you can look to all. Okay, specifically, you can look to all the impacts of. You can look to all the impacts of the 1AC, where we talk about helping minorities, about how a black family and a Latino family will make nearly 30K per year, which means that this point shows that our plan affects them, which means that we're preventing a lot of systemic impacts that happen in the status quo, because we prevent a lot of things that happen to these this larger group that make up the lower tax bracket, which we're affecting. Additionally. So that's first of all. The second voter is of sales tax versus income tax. Okay, the first argument is that they drop a crucial point that my partner makes in her speech, where she says that the money that they pay from the higher sales tax means that the government will always have more money to help the people with social programs and things. This was never addressed, which means it's a direct terms that shows on our case, because we are going to argue that the biggest impact today is who is going to help the lower, specifically the lower tax bracket. People making under 30K, because they are always disproportionately affected by the status quo, because they make significantly less money than everyone else. Whichever team can help this lower tax bracket is going to win, because although they claim that we are not we are affecting the middle class, we claim that the lower class makes up the largest portion, which means that we are always going to win on a net beneficial scale and a systemic impact scale, because they make up the largest portion of the tax bracket. They drop this, which means that if we help them by a little bit, we
Point of order.
Yeah.
Stop time. This whole idea that now the poorer class, the lower class is larger than the middle class and make up a larger portion is the first response that we have in anything in terms of the middle class. We would have made an argumentation that clearly the middle class is larger than the poor, but we didn't have a chance to, because this is the first time I've heard him say that the poor class is larger than the middle class.
my response is I believe I said many times that the poor class makes up a significant proportion, specifically Latino ethnic minorities.
Just significant, never larger.
Okay, so so basically, we're saying that we help the lower income tax bracket a lot more, which means that if they are larger, and you buy that argument, this means that we went on a systemic impact and net beneficial scale, because we are always helping more people significantly with a 15 to 0% tax drop, which is bigger than anything they could ever solve for. Okay, third. Pretty much this third will be record keeping. Okay. Their only response is that we do not solve for record keeping because we only help people under 30K, and they say that record keeping only applies to 37K. However, our point is that if they are making under 30K, which still applies to 37K, they will still be always paying for the record keeping, which means that our plan uniquely solves for this, because anyone paying under 30K does not have an income tax bracket, which means that we solve for record keeping. Specifically, this means that we get access to our impacts about exploitation how they always have to pay more money. And this is just another warrant to show that they are always disproportionately affected in society, which means that we are uniquely able to solve for this because we help people making under 30K, which again impacts out to saving a lot of systemic violence and things that happen in the status quo. Okay. So another thing I'd like to mention is that they don't impact out their arguments. They say there's an increase in racism, classism, which is, first of all, not true. We are the only ones solving for this because of the fact that, you can see that we are clearly solving for racism in the status quo. If I make the argument that, ethnic minorities are more disproportionately affected, we are the only ones in the status quo that solve for racism. They make middle-class arguments, but my partner clearly shows that right now, the lower income tax bracket is made up of mainly minorities, and we help them. We solve for racism and the things that they are talking about because we help these minorities any more than they could, which is the biggest impact in today's round, because we can see that they are more disproportionately affected than anyone else. Okay. Okay, that's fine. They said. Okay. Onto the tax evasion point. Okay. Okay. Let me see tax evasion. Okay. So the biggest point about tax evasion, first off, is going to be in our. The biggest point about tax evasion, first off, goes in our case because I clearly made a turn in the earlier speech that shows that actually the turn is that when the rich are able to pay for things that are more expensive, this money directly goes to the government, which means that things such as yachts, like my partner said, if there are a lot of money, the higher sales tax gives the government a lot of money, which is put into social programs and things such as that. They drop this turn, which is key because we're saying that the biggest impact today, whichever team wins today, is going to be the ones that solve pretty much for the best. And we say that net beneficially, we can see that we are solving because the biggest part of America, the biggest part of the lowest income tax bracket is going to be the people making no money, under 30K. You can specifically extend the part that shows that income inequality is rampant, that the top 1% own 1/3 of America's net worth, which clearly shows that they make the biggest part. We solve for the most systemic impacts in the 1AC. Thank you.